Hello and welcome to the Following Truth Bible Study on YouTube. As always, I'm your host LJ. In this video, we're going to be looking at a couple of different things. So we're going to be looking at how did Jesus die? Was it cross, as the traditional Christian view would have it, that Jesus died on a cross? Was he hung on a tree, or was he crucified or killed upon a stake or a torture stake, as Jehovah's Witnesses would like to say? So the tree is often used by Hebrew Israelites, so we'll deal with that. Obviously, the cross is the usual and the traditional understanding from Christianity, that Jesus was crucified upon a cross. So that is my position. I'm just going to let you know where I'm coming from straight off, and I'm going to look at the evidence that I think demonstrates that the Jehovah's Witnesses position, specifically on the torture stake, is wrong, and that also the position that Jesus was hung on a tree, as per like the Hebrew Israelites. There are a few other different people out there that even Christians, some Christians do say that Jesus was hung on a tree, and there is sometimes it's used as a contradiction in the Bible by Muslims or atheists to say, right, your Bible has contradictions. Jesus is stated as being crucified on a cross, but he's also said to have hung on a tree. So we're going to look at those contradictions. If, as always, if you are new to the channel, please give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe, because it will keep you up to date when I go live. I do try to go live 2 to 3 times per week, and obviously if you are subscribed, it will allow you to get a notification from YouTube to let you know that I have gone live. So we've got Harry Silver here, says amen. Thank you very much for being here. And Wooly says, will you discuss if it was a small t or a capital T shaped cross? I suppose that would be it. Not really sure what the difference would be in the T shape, whether if it's a T or a T shape there. Sometimes we do get the X cross, which I'm not actually, personally, I wouldn't be opposed to, whether it was an X-shaped cross, but I'm not too sure, Willie, the difference, what you're saying there between a small T and a capital T. So obviously we've got the cross, which is like a T shape, which would be more like a capital than a small t. Yeah, some Greek manuscripts do use the letter tau. I'm not going to be using that as part of my argument, to be honest. Actually, the Greek letter tau. It is something that is used in some Greek manuscripts, but I haven't actually formulated my argument based upon that. So it is something that we could possibly look into, but like I say, it isn't something that I have formulated my argument or put a dependent upon. I think that there's more evidence out there, so we'll have a look at that. I'm not sure if Dennis is in the chat at all. And Dennis is obviously is our Jehovah's Witness who often frequents this channel, and I do appreciate him being here. So I know that this one is going to be specifically where myself and Dennis do go in our separate ways. We agree on quite a few things. Hello, Dennis. Thank you very much for being here. Obviously, we disagree on certain things, and this is going to be one of those things. I'm not trying to attack anybody here or say, your belief is completely wrong or anything. I'm just going to put through my point, the evidence that I think that supports the position for the traditional cross. And if you accept that, you accept it. If you look at the evidence and you say, right, well, I don't think that the evidence is convincing, then that's fine as well. I have no problem with people who agree or disagree on my channel. Those that are frequent to the channel will know that I don't have that problem. So I'm only presenting the evidence that I feel supports my position and why I have that position. And yeah, it's up to you at the end of the day whether you look at that evidence and you say, right, okay, I agree or I disagree. And as always, I will be willing to take comments and discussion about why you disagree, if there's something you disagree with, why you disagree with that. And maybe I'd be able to explain better why I think that doesn't work. But anyway, as always, more than happy for people to disagree or agree. And we're going to take, like I say, take a look. I'm going to start with the cross versus the tree, because this is in scripture. If you have like a normal translation of the Bible, so a Protestant translation of the Bible, you will find that, and hopefully my internet is not going to kick me out, because it does say that it's struggling. So I do apologize. Again, if I do go off at any point, it is because my internet connection. Okay, so our position is the evidence for cross is not enough. We don't reject it totally. That's fine. And if you're kind of open to the possibility that it is a cross, hopefully I will be able to present you enough evidence that you say, well done, LJ, you've been able to convince me that Jesus died on a cross, and you're going to accept that as the basically as the instrument on which Jesus died. And if I don't present enough evidence, then you won't. So that's how it will work, I suppose. Okay, so like I say, I'm going to start with the cross versus the tree, because like I say, if you get like a KJV Bible or an NIV Bible or an ESV, so the KJV or most modern translations of the Bible, you will find that these Bibles have the words, so Jesus died on a cross, and Jesus was hung on a tree. So this is the one I'm going to start with. It is the more simpler of the two, so we'll ease into it. We'll start off with a more basic one, and we'll just look at the evidence for the cross versus the tree. Okay, so the cross versus the tree. So there are many arguments made against the Bible, and like I say, one of those being that it contains contradictions, and one of them, so it's used, the contradictions, as a lot of people probably know, that I am writing a book on contradictions in the Bible at the moment. So that is something that I'm looking into, contradictions in the Bible. And it is used quite often to prove that the cross versus the tree is often used to prove that there are contradictions within the Bible. And the Bible supposedly records two different ways on which Jesus died. And so this is obviously used. But when we understand this correctly, this contradiction is very easy to explain. And as I say, there are many Hebrew Israelites use this, and they like to demonstrate, or they like to argue that Jesus was hung from a tree, just like many of the slaves were during the in the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade. And this is often used to show that the slaves died in the same way as what the Messiah did. And so this is just further, is used as further support to push their position, to say that Jesus was black and that he was a Hebrew Israelite, basically, and they are the same people. So let's have a look at this cross versus tree. So there are clear scriptures in the Bible that say that Jesus was crucified upon a cross. So we're, like I say, we're not dealing at this precise moment between the cross and the stake. We're dealing with the cross versus the tree, and we're dealing with the renderings, the English renderings in most modern versions and the KJV. So we're looking specifically at those. And yeah, it does. The Quran is incorrect with its understanding of the crucifixion, and I have actually done a detailed study not long ago on the evidence for the crucifixion. So I'm not going to deal specifically with the evidence for the crucifixion. If you would like to discuss that, that's fine. And like I say, I have done a detailed study in that. But let's look at the cross versus the tree. So we have verses like in Matthew. So let's start with Matthew 27:40, and saying, thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. And 27:42, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. So Matthew records the cross. Mark also records the cross. Save thyself and come down from the cross in Mark 15:30. Mark 15:32, let Christ the King of Israel descend now from the cross, that we may see and believe. And they that were crucified with him reviled him. So we have Matthew and Mark. We also have Luke that mentions about the cross as well. So, and as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simeon of Cyrene, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. So we have the cross mentioned again in Luke. And then we have John, which says where they crucified him. So those that say that Jesus wasn't crucified, they have to deal with the fact that the Bible clearly states that Jesus was crucified. That's just a fact that the Bible states. So where they crucified him, and two other with him, on either side one, and Jesus in the midst. And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And also in John 19:31, we also get the cross mentioned here. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation, that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was an high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So here we clearly get the mention of the cross in the modern versions of the Bible. And this is from the King James Version, but the modern versions would render it in the same way. Now, the cross is also mentioned in other places. I mean, we can deal with lots and lots of places in the New Testament where the cross is mentioned, but we'll just give some examples. So 1 Corinthians 1:17, for Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. And then Philippians 2:8, and being found in the fashion of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So it's clear that the New Testament states that Jesus died on a cross. We also have Thomas stated that he wanted to see the nails prints in John 20:25. The other disciples therefore said unto him, we have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, except I shall see in his hands the prints of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. Now, when Jesus appeared to Thomas, he told him to behold his hands, and showing him the holes of the nails, as Thomas had wanted to see. John 20:27. Then saith he to Thomas, reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord and my God. So we clearly see that the Bible is depicting a cross, a crucifixion that took place. Now, hands are not pierced if somebody is hung. So it's clearly the Bible is stating that it was that there was a crucifixion on a cross. But we do see that there are 5 Bible verses that says that Jesus was hanged on a tree. Acts 5:30, the God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree. So that is in the book of Acts. And then we get 2 more in the book of Acts. In Acts 10:39, and we are witnesses of all things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. Acts 13:29, and when they had fulfilled all that was written of him, they took him down from the tree and laid it in a sepulchre. So we clearly see that it is being stated regarding a tree and a hanging. 1 Peter 2:24, who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed. And Paul also states it in Galatians 3:13, that Jesus was cursed, because anyone that is hanged on a tree is cursed. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. So we clearly see that there are Bible verses that state that Jesus was hanged on a tree. So we can't ignore the 2 references here. We can't say that, you know, we're going to just take the cross and we're going to ignore the I'm just going to wait a second while my internet kicks back in, hopefully. Yeah, it seems to have. So we can't just ignore that. There are 5 Bible verses, but we also cannot take the 5 Bible verses and then override all of those other verses that clearly state that Jesus died by crucifixion upon a cross. So no, I don't think that. No, it's not about the manuscripts replacing tree with cross. These are different references. They are literally stating tree. So the translation here is tree, and the other is cross. They're two different words. So I don't think that any manuscript actually replaces it. I will have a look at that. But these verses are taken from the King James Version. So this isn't a translation error. This isn't something that where the same word is being used and it's translating it in one place as tree and in another place it's translating it as cross. They're two different words, so it's completely different. So they're not the same word at all. So I maybe what you mean is the in the manuscript where, say, the Greek word for cross is used, is that replaced with the Greek word for tree? That I don't know. I don't think so. But that, like I say, in these 5 verses, they are different Greek words. So here we're going to deal with that. But obviously, Jesus can't have been crucified and hanged on a tree. So that would create a contradiction if... so the crime that Jesus was is not quite pertinent to the study that we're doing, but the crime that Jesus was accused of was he was accused of being or making himself the Messiah. And so at his trial, they asked, "Tell us, are you the Christ?" That was the accusation that was made against him. Are you the Messiah? And Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the one that they were waiting for. So they didn't believe him. And so obviously they wanted him crucified. That was the accusation that was made against him on the cross, at the trial before his crucifixion. So let's have a look at this supposed contradiction. The simple fact is that both crucified on a cross and hanged on a tree mean the exact same thing. They are synonymous for one another. They both mean to be crucified upon a cross, which is exactly what Jesus was. He was crucified on a cross. Now you have to remember we are dealing with English translations of the Greek language. So we have to look at what the original Greek means. So the Greek word translated as hanged in Acts, 1 Peter and Galatians, when referring to Jesus, is kremanumi, which means to suspend or to hang up, not hang as in hanging from the neck. The English to hang something, while it can mean to suspend with the lower parts dangling, as in like hanging the washing or hanging a person, like hanging by the neck, it does not necessarily mean this, as there are other definitions for the word. So if we have a look here at the Greek, this is the Greek word kremanumi, and it means to hang, suspend. I am hanged, to hang, hang up. So you see hang up. Now we also see in the 1611 King James Version, so this is the 1611 dictionary for the King James. You can find this on 1611 King James dictionary. That's all you need to type in, 1611 King James dictionary. You can find this online. And it just means that one of the definitions within to hang that they used in the English to hang was to place on something fixed on high. So that was just one of the usages, to place on something fixed on high. And when we look at the dictionary today, we can see that while it does mean to suspend, it can also mean to hang up. Like you hang up a picture, you literally put it up on something, but you're hanging it onto the wall. That doesn't mean that you're hanging it by the neck. You hang a picture on the wall, and you use a nail, and you put it up onto the wall. And it just means like to attach or to hook up. So this is just one of the definitions that even today to hang means. So which English definition should we be understanding this to mean? Well, when we take it with the fact that we have the Bible verses that say that Jesus was crucified upon a cross, which the Hebrew Israelites, by the way, will totally ignore. They're just going to focus on these 5 verses. But when you take it with the cross and the reference to the fact that Jesus was nailed to a cross, you cannot take it that he was then suspended by the neck and hung. You would have to understand the hanging up onto something as being what was being in reference here. And we see that when Judas killed himself, he went and hanged himself, right? And so in Matthew 27:5, and he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. So we know that Judas hanged himself. But what we will see that when Judas hanged himself, there is a totally different Greek word used. And it's different than what was used for the hanging of Jesus. So this one is apachko, and it means to choke, strangle, to hang. So this is the word. If you were referring to somebody being hung by the neck, this is the word that you would use. So in English, you might be able to, you would have 2 words or 2 meanings from the English word hang, but they are translated from 2 different Greek words, and the 2 different Greek words mean 2 different things. They mean the 2 different ways that we would use the word hang in English, or 2 of the ways that we would use hang. And if you want to use hanging by the neck, as in to choke, as in to be hung up, then this is the Greek word that you would utilize, which is utilized of Judas, but it's not utilized of Jesus. It's a different word when it comes to Jesus. So the English may give a kind of confusion between what's actually being meant, but the Greek does not. There is no problem in the Greek. The Greek specifically says one is hung by the neck and one is hung up upon high. There is no confusion in the Greek. 2 different Greek words. Judas did die through hanging, but that is not the same hanging how Jesus was said to have died. So what about the tree? So we understand here that the hanging is different, but what about the tree? The Greek word for cross is stauros, and the Greek word for crucified is staurou. So was Jesus crucified upon a cross? So we're not going to deal with the cross. We're still not dealing with the cross or the stake here. We're still just dealing with the cross. We're now going to look at stauros and the tree. So the Greek word for tree, what is rendered tree in those 5 verses, is actually the Greek word exulon. And it just means, and if you see there, it means anything made of wood. A piece of wood, a club, staff, the trunk of a tree, something used for support. These are the Greek word here, exulon, just means something made of wood. So Jesus was hung up on high on something that was made of wood. Now, the English renders that as hanging on a tree, but the more specific definition of that would be to hang upon something made of wood. And obviously, wood is made from tree. So there, it says there, used to support the crossbar of a cross in crucifixion. And that's actually in the Strong's Concordance there. So it literally has the definition being, or one of the definitions as being this crossbeam, or the support of the crossbeam. And that's in one of the definitions. Yeah, crosses are made, trees grow. So crosses are made from trees. Crosses are something that are wooden. So that's why exulon is used here, because the cross is something that is wooden. And that's what exulon means. It doesn't mean a literal tree. It means something made from wood. And this exulon is translated in places in the KJV as staves, right? So like a staff, something that you would utilize to help walk, a walking staff. Staves just being the plural of that. And so that exulon is utilized in verses like this. So they're just utilized for the staves. And in the NIV, you can see that actually it's translated as, in this verse, it's translated exulon as clubs. Now, when we go back to exulon, you'll see that one of the definition is a club. It's a stave, really. That's the correct rendering should be like a walking stave, to be honest. But club, something made of wood. That's what we're looking at in here. So the Greek word exulon just means something made of wood, and obviously the cross was made of wood. Now the Greek word for a tree, as in a literal physical tree, is not exulon. It's dendron. It's a different word. So if you want to utilize a physical tree, then you wouldn't use exulon, because that does not denote a tree. It just means something made of wood. A tree is dendron. And that is utilized 25 times in the Bible. And you can see here that the Strong's definition for dendron is a tree. That's what a tree is. So if you wanted to say that somebody was hung upon a tree, you would utilize this word, apakcho, along with dendron. Not the Greek words that are utilized upon what Jesus is said to have hanged upon a tree. That is a completely different Greek rendering that is there. And dendron is translated as tree throughout the New Testament. It's utilized many, many times. So we've got Matthew 3:10, where it says, and now also the axe is laid upon the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. So this is a literal physical tree in these. Jude 1:12, so it talks about the trees whose fruit wherewith without fruit. And obviously Luke 6:43, where it says, for a good tree bringeth forth for a good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit, neither does a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. So for every tree is known by his own fruit. So we clearly have this dendron being translated as tree. It's referring to a tree. So when we go back and we look at what Jesus was crucified, or when Jesus was crucified, we are told that 2 others were crucified along with him. And it states that they were also hanged. So they were crucified. And it's the same Greek word here. So Luke 2, where is it? Luke, where? Do I have that? No. No, I don't have that. Luke 23:39. That one is missing from the slides. Luke 23:39. In the Gospel of Luke, it is stated that these 2 thieves, they were hanged. And it says, and one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, if thou be the Christ, save thyself and us. So, and that word there, hanged, is the same word as what Jesus was hanged. So we clearly get different Greek words when we are looking at the Greek for hanged on a tree would be completely different than the English rendering of hanged on a tree that is utilized for Jesus. Now, Paul uses the term, and I don't think I haven't got the slides, but Paul utilizes the term hanged on a tree in Galatians 3:13 because he is bringing attention. He specifically, and you will have to go and have a look this up because I don't have this slide there. Apology. I added this in yesterday just as another reference. So Paul in Galatians 3:13, he is referring back to Deuteronomy 21:23. So it's Deuteronomy 21:23. And it says, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed by God, that thy land be not defiled, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. Now, when we look at Galatians 3:13, it says, Christ had redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree. So we get that reference back to Deuteronomy 21:23 because Paul is here, he's trying to say that Jesus has been made a curse, and that so he's utilizing Deuteronomy 21:23 in order to show that Jesus has been accursed. And so that was the language that he used in Galatians 3:13 to bring the attention back to that specific verse, because his point in that particular verse is to talk about Jesus being cursed and him being cursed for us through the law, and that's what he's referencing back there. So, while the English hanged on a tree may appear contradictory, when we understand that the Greek words that are utilized by the gospel writers and then the writers of Acts and Galatians, the two they're not the same. Okay, the hanged on a by such as what Judas was, and the hanged for Jesus, they are not the same. The hanged on a tree, right, is basically just to say is to be fixed upon something made of wood, and that's what the Greek actually states in when it's in reference to Jesus. It's fixed upon something that is made of wood. So while the English renderings, a lot of them do say that Jesus was hanged on a tree, when you understand what that hanging is to fix upon something on high, and then you understand what the tree is, just something made of wood and not a physical tree, because that's a completely different Greek word. We should understand that hanged on a tree and crucified on a cross are synonymous. They mean exactly the same thing. They mean to be placed upon some on wood and hung upon high. And so that is why we understand the cross versus the tree. And so those people, like the Hebrew Israelites, who like to take these 5 verses and say that Jesus was hung on a tree, he wasn't crucified upon a cross, he was hung on a tree, and then they're going to ignore all the other verses that talk about Jesus's death upon the cross, without looking at the Greek, without the understanding of what is behind those 5 verses and the meaning behind them. Once you do that the contradiction, as some people like to say that there is, and this utilization by the Hebrew Israelites to kind of further their point that Jesus he died in the same way as what many of the slaves in the slave trade did. So when we understand that just disappears, and they are synonymous with one another. So that hopefully will clear up that problem of that contradiction. Now we're going to look at the more complicated of the two. So we're now going to look at, and this is the one where obviously me and Dennis will separate. Was Jesus crucified upon a cross, or was it on a torture stake, or a stake? Was he killed on a stake, as the Jehovah's Witnesses will say? So we've already looked. We now know that the Greek word for the cross is stauros. So that's the Greek word for cross, or the Greek word translated as cross in the many modern versions and the KJV. But now we come to the point where it is claimed by some, including, and I'm not going to say that it's specifically the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I would say that it's predominantly the Jehovah's Witnesses, that stauros actually means a stake. It doesn't mean a cross. It means a stake. And the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that, or as we've already had it kind of stated to us by Dennis, where he said let me find that. It was that the position is the evidence for a cross is not enough. We don't totally reject it. So hopefully I'm going to be able to present enough evidence here. Now, so we need to look at the difference between cross and stake. Now, the Jehovah's Witness claim that the Bible does not, in fact, describe the shape of the instrument of Jesus's death, but it does give evidence that it was a stake and not a cross, and therefore the correct translation is stake. So on the Jehovah's Witness.org website, it states, many view the cross as the most common symbol of Christianity. However, the Bible does not describe the instrument of Jesus's death, so no one can know its shape with absolute certainty. Still, the Bible provides evidence that Jesus died not on a cross, but on an upright stake. So that is from, like I say, Jehovah'sWitness.org. Interestingly, the main biblical evidence that I can see that is presented by the Jehovah's Witnesses is simply the word translated as cross, stauros. And they argue that the meaning is stake and not cross. And from what I can see, this is in essence essentially it is the argument that the biblical evidence that the Jehovah's Witnesses allude to, which in fact requires extra biblical evidence to actually support it. So the New World Translation in, say, Matthew 27:40 has the wording torture stake. So it says, and saying, you who would throw down the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are a son of God, come down off the torture stake. Now, interestingly, the New World Translation adds the word torture before the translation of stake. Now, it must be noted that regardless of the correct translation of stauros, the word torture, which is the Greek word basinzo, this one, basinizo, meaning I examine as by torture, or I torment. That word is not found in any verse that is preceding or succeeding stauros. So when stauros is used, we do not have this word. It is used, this word is used in verses such as Matthew 8:29. So I should have, there you go. I've got another slide which I should have had there, but it's not there. In Matthew, I'll read it anyway. So it's Matthew 8:29, where the devils cry out to Jesus when he's come to torture them before the time. And the New World Translation translates it as torture. So they translate basinizo as torture. And I'll read it from the KJV. And behold, they cried out, saying, what have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? So we have the word torment there. And that is the same as in the New World Translation. And look, they scream, saying, what have we to do with you, Son of God? Did you come here to torment us before the appointed time? So we get the torment, the torture, that word, which is translated from basinizo. Now, there is another Greek word which is also translated as torture in the KJV, which is this one, tampanizo. And that is just used one time in the New Testament. And it is also translated as torture in the New World Translation. And I do have that one. So that is the KJV at the top. tortured, and it's in Hebrews 11:35. It's the only time that particular word is used, and in both the KJV and in the New World Translation, that word is translated as tortured. Now, neither of those words can be found before stauros. So even if stake was the correct translation, then the correct rendering would be simply stake and not torture stake. Torture has been added to the New World Translation when it is not stated in the Greek. Although we must at least acknowledge that the stake would indeed be a stake where torture occurred, even though that torture would lead to eventual death. So I would say that a better rendering would be a death stake, but that would just be nitpicking because neither of those words exist in the actual text. Now, we could say a torture cross in English. Like if we're going to translate it as cross, we could say torture's cross, but we don't translate it as torture cross because torture is not in the translate. There is no Greek that says torture. So to render it torture stake is just, it is incorrect. It is adding to that. The correct rendering, if stauros means stake, would just be stake. Now we see that most other versions of the Bible, in that same verse, Matthew 27:40, they translate stauros as cross. All of them, virtually all modern versions of the Bible translate this stauros as cross. So we have the NIV, the ESV, the KJV, and you could probably pick your version and it's still going to read cross. That's in the NLT, the BSB, the NASB, the CSB, CEV, ISV, the Net Bible, ASV, Dewey Reams, Dari Bible, just to name a few. The Aramaic version in plain English also has cross in that verse, and the Latin Vulgate also has cross in the English translation. So we see that in basically most versions of the Bible we are getting cross. We are getting the word cross. We're not literally getting cross, we are getting the word cross. Now, the Jehovah's Witness website further states, according to a critical lexicon and concordance to the English and Greek New Testament, stauros never means two pieces of wood joining each other at any angle. Now, this is a very important part to remember. This claim that stauros never means two pieces of wood joining each other at any angle. All right. That point there is vital to remember. That one is pretty well off topic. Maybe I'll do you could bring that one up on next time that we do our do the open chat and stuff, but I'm not really going to go into the Peshitta on this study, sorry. But yeah, bring that one back up on Sunday. We'll have a look at it. Thank you for the question anyway, Wooly. Okay, so if it is correct and stauros never means two pieces of wood joining each other at any angle, then we must ask as to why the Jehovah's Witnesses have not always taught this. The Jehovah's Witnesses have not always believed that Jesus died on a stake. The Jehovah's Witnesses are, Charles Taze Russell in the 1870s, I'm not going to go into how the Jehovah's Witnesses were formed and stuff, but for around about 50 to 60 years, they believed and taught the cross of Jesus. It was stated in a 1929 edition of Life that Jesus was crucified upon the cross, page 216. So you can find that, if you can find Life from 1929, on page 216, you will see Jesus. It states Jesus was crucified upon the cross. Joseph Franklin Rutherford, in the 1921 book, The Harp of God, referred to the cross of Christ as the greatest pivotal truth of divine arrangement. And he said, the ransom price was provided at the cross. The cross of Christ is the great pivotal truth of the divine arrangement from which radiates the hopes of men. The Harp of God, J.F. Rutherford, page 141. Okay. For those that may not know these names, I would suggest going and just having a quick study on the formation of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm pretty sure that Dennis will recognize these names. Yes, I am hopefully on Sunday. I'm trying to do an open chat on Sundays. So it's just basically open discussion on Sundays. So you can come in. You can, if you would like to come in, Don Hugh, and discuss the Quran and whether the Quran says that Jesus died, or whether we have evidence for that. You can do so. I have done a study on that, but you are more than welcome to come in and ask the questions of me if you would like to do that. That's not a problem. On page 114 of that book, we find this image. Yeah, and I do engage. I will be much more engaged of the comments and stuff when I'm actually doing an open discussion. Obviously, here now I'm just doing one specific study into one topic, but yeah, you are more than welcome to come and ask questions on Sunday. We don't run from questions; we try to answer them. So you're more than welcome to come in and ask your questions, and they will be. I'll deal with them in a lot more detail than what I obviously have tonight. Okay, so like I say, from page 114, we have that image with Jesus on a cross. Now, J.F. Rutherford was the second president of the Incorporated Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. Rutherford played a major role in the Jehovah's Witnesses organization and the formation of their doctrine. It was Rutherford himself that would move the belief away from the cross to the stake. He wrote in his 1936 book, Riches, Jesus was crucified, not on a cross of wood, such as exhibited in many images and pictures, and which images are made and exhibited by men. Jesus was crucified by nailing his body to a tree. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to understand tree here as something made of wood, which I presume it would be, or whether it's a physical tree. But as we saw, that Rutherford had stated prior to that, in 1921, that the cross is the great pivotal truth of the divine arrangement. But then when we get to 1936, we have a change. And we see that Rutherford is now saying that he wasn't crucified upon a tree, on a cross. Now, the Watchtower magazine used to have a cross in the corner. It used to utilize the cross as a symbol on the Watchtower, and that was utilized on their magazine all the way up until October of 1931, before it was removed. So up until 1931, this cross was up in the corner, and so that was utilized. But now, obviously, it's not there. But it used to be. It used to be there. The cross was there. And it was not included on the cover of the renamed. So as you can see here, Watch Tower is two separate words. It was renamed or rebranded to Watchtower, as in one word, for the 15th of October 1931 edition, and that cross disappears. Now, until the publication of the New World Translation in the 1950s, that's the New Testament, and the full Bible, the Old and the New Testament, in the 1960s, most Jehovah's Witnesses used the KJV. Now, obviously, we've seen that the KJV translates Stauros as cross. So the Jehovah's Witnesses website states that God rejects worship that uses images or symbols, including the cross. So God rejects worship that uses images or symbols, including the cross. God commanded the Israelites not to use the form of any symbol in their worship. And Christians are likewise told to flee from idolatry. Now, this itself is not an argument against the cross. It is only an argument against the worship of images or symbols. And I would agree that we should not worship images or symbols. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't utilize them, or that you cannot utilize a cross. I would personally have a problem with some of the images that the Catholic Church has, such as Jesus depicted upon the cross, or those of Mary or the saints and stuff, because we are clearly told not to make that type of image, and we're certainly not told to worship that type of image. But when it comes to the cross, if you're worshipping the cross, stop. Don't worship the cross. That's not what we're meant to be doing. So even if you are a Christian and you believe that Jesus died upon the cross and you are worshipping the cross, stop. You're not meant to worship the cross. You're meant to worship the one upon the cross, or the one that came down off the cross and resurrected, not the cross itself. So I would agree with this part. But that isn't really an argument against actually having the cross or a stake, if it's meant to be the stake. But we must ask now, what happened to the Jehovah's Witnesses and followers who believed in and were taught the cross before the cross was dropped and replaced with the stake? It's important to take note of the actual language that is used in the claim on the Jehovah's Witness website. And so this is from their website. So I'm not trying to misrepresent them in any way. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible by utilizing their language, their Tungji, I have no idea why people, but Catholics do worship that image upon, whether they're worshiping Jesus upon the cross or whatever, but they definitely worship that, and I don't think that we should be doing that. I don't personally have a cross or stuff, but I think that the cross is an image that represents Christianity. And if I was to utilize one, which I have, like T-shirts with the cross on, the cross is empty, because that's my understanding is Jesus is not on the cross. So the Catholics have a dead man on a cross. That's what they have. But Jesus is not on the cross. That's the point of Christianity, is that he's no longer on the cross. It's the empty cross. And so if you utilize a cross, I personally don't think that there's any problem with utilizing a cross in as a symbol, or as an image that you come to when you're looking towards God, that empty cross, because that's the point. It's an empty cross. But if you are worshipping the image of the cross or Jesus on the cross, don't do that. That's certainly not something that we should be doing. That would definitely be wrong. And they do kiss the cross. They kiss the feet of Jesus. They kiss Mary. It's veneration, as they say. It's not. It's worship. They know that it's worship. But if they think that they can just utilize a different word, and it all becomes okay, I mean, it's very strange. But okay, so it states on the website, according to a critical lexicon and concordance to the English and Greek New Testament. A critical lexicon. I should trademark an empty tomb charm to wear on the necklace. Yeah, well, the empty tomb is obviously the fact is that the tomb and the cross are empty. That's the point of Christianity. So yeah, to be honest, I don't think anybody's even done the tomb as an image to represent Jesus up from, for the resurrection of Jesus. That is a good point. I'm going to look into that. Trademark that one. An empty tomb. The empty cross has already been done. Empty tomb. I like that as well, because it's the empty tomb represents that Jesus is risen. He's not in the burial place. So he's not on the cross. He's not where he died. He's not where he was buried. He's resurrected, and he's on neither of those. So I don't like the Catholic, regardless of whether you are allowed to make images of that or not, to the image of Jesus on the cross kind of says, that's a dead man on a cross, and that's not what Jesus is. He's not a dead man on a cross. So I don't like that image anyway, just on that basis. But yeah, so we have a critical lexicon and concordance to the English. Yeah, you can have a little angel on the outside of the tomb that will represent that Jesus has risen from the dead. As long as the stone is pulled back and we have an empty tomb, that is a good point. Shouldn't tell me stuff like that. You should go and do it yourself. You'll make a killing out of that. Okay, so we have to. So in here it states that a critical lexicon. So we have to say that this indicates one singular critical lexicon, even though it's not stated which critical lexicon and concordance to the English and Greek New Testament that this is in. It does state that. But when we look at the Greek in like some of the major lexicons, the big ones, we have Thayer's, and you'll see that a cross. So this is Stavros, and we clearly have, number one, an upright stake, but number two, it's also got a cross. That is the second rendering of Stavros. And it's the well-known instrument of most cruel and ignominious punishment, borrowed by the Greeks and Romans from the Phoenicians. So we clearly get the cross is utilized in Thayer's, and we also see Strong's. It says an upright stake, a cross. So those are two big critical lexicons, Thayer's and Strong's, that state a cross. So yes, we have an upright stake, but we also have a cross. The Roman instrument of crucifixion, it states in Strong's. So I will also, so I need to look into this cross stake. So what does stauros really mean? And that is the crux of the problem, although that is a pun. It is the crux of the problem. Those that don't speak Latin probably wouldn't get that, unless you do know what crux is. Well, I do not think that this is so much a theological issue. What matters is that Jesus did in fact die and that he did in fact resurrect. Those are, like, as I've just been saying with Tone G, that's the point, is that the theological relevance of this is that he died and that he resurrected. That's the Christian understanding. But I do think that it opens up the question, can we trust the Bible? And is the Bible accurate, especially in the English translations? So I do think that the issue is worthy of study, and I don't think that it's a simple waste of time. I think it's important that we do this. And I think that any group that brings doubt to either of these issues, we need to address. The Jehovah's Witnesses, as far as I know, do make quite a big deal out of the cross versus stake. Maybe it's more for some than others, but from a lot of the Jehovah's Witnesses that I have spoken to, it does seem to be an issue. So, and they do say that Jesus was killed on the stake. So now I'm not going to say that Jesus was crucified on a T-shaped cross. I think that there's actually a case for the X-shaped cross, that Jesus was actually crucified on an X. But I don't think that that's something that I'm willing to defend or argue for at this precise moment in time. I don't think I've studied it enough, but we'll go with the traditional T-shape because it makes no difference to me. I think that the T-shape is fine. It's whether it's the cross or the stake, which is the important part. The Jehovah's Witnesses website offers the following evidence for stauros meaning stake. And they say the Greek word rendered cross in many modern Bible versions, torture stake. We have to say also the King James Version, which is the Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses would have utilized before they brought out the New World Translation. That it's translated as torture stake is stauros. In classical Greek, this word meant merely an upright stake or pale. Later, it also came to be used for an execution stake having a crosspiece. The Imperial Bible Dictionary acknowledges this, saying the Greek word for cross, stauros, properly signified a stake, an upright pole or piece of paling, on which anything might be hung or which might be used in impaling, fencing in a piece of ground. And then notice that we have these, I never can remember what they're called. Ellipses, I think they're called. The little dots. It indicates that what follows is not directly comes after. There's something missing, and I think they're called ellipses. If I've butchered that, I do apologize. But I think they're ellipses. Now, it says then, even amongst the Romans, the crux from which our cross is derived appears to have been originally an upright pole. And so that's, you can find where that is underneath there. And so that's on the website. Now, as I say, those ellipses, or whatever they're called, the little dots, indicate that there is something missing. And I think that sometimes it's because it's irrelevant and doesn't need to be included. Sometimes it's because something is being removed that might contradict or not support what you're trying to push. And so this is what's being removed. But a modification was introduced as the dominion and usages of Rome extended themselves through Greek-speaking countries. So a modification was introduced as the dominion and usages of Rome extended themselves through Greek-speaking countries. Now, as I say, they not only removed those rather important words, but actually they cut the writing short as well. So let's see what they left off. It's not just a single word or even two words. It's not even a single section. It's a huge portion of the writing. This is what they left off. And this always remained the most prominent part. But from the time that it began to be used as an instrument of punishment, a transverse piece of wood was commonly added. Not, however, always even then. For it would seem that there were more kinds of death than one by the cross. This being sometimes accomplished by transfixing the criminal with a pole, which was run through the back and spine and came out at his mouth. And then some Latin, which I'm not going to read, and in another place. And then, so it's Seneca mentions three different forms. I see, says he, three crosses not intended of one sort, but fashioned in different ways. One sort suspending by the head persons bent forward towards the earth, others transfixing them through their secret parts, others extending their arms out on a patibulum. There can be no doubt, however, that the latter was the more common, and that about the period of the Gospel age, crucifixion was usually accomplished by suspending the criminal on a cross piece of wood. That was missing from this that you can find posted on the Jehovah's Witness website. The important part there being that about the period of the Gospel age, crucifixion was usually accomplished by suspending the criminal on a cross piece of wood. And that is the full writing there. I'm not going to read all of that again, but if you would like to read that, you can do so. And we're talking about the patibulum, which is the crossbeam here as well. And we'll look into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But what we're clearly getting is that there was a lot missing from that specific piece of information that you can find on the let me see. Yeah, I think that's back. So, okay, so when a text has to be edited in such a way in order to make it support a position and then offered as evidence, then it is deliberately being deceiving. And it must be asked as to what the purpose for that being done. So it has to be questioned as to what agenda were those words removed that actually negate the position being presented. So the position, oh, can you hear me now? Oh, right, okay. No, I might have gone, but hopefully I'm back. So yeah, we have to question why those. So what did you hear? Have we done this part of the writing? Hopefully you managed to find that bit. But I do think that that's something that the Jehovah's Witnesses website should address, that the missing parts of that text and all of the text which is not included. But the Jehovah's Witnesses website also states, the Bible generally uses the Greek word stauros when referring to the instrument of Jesus' execution, Matthew 27:40, as we've already seen, and John 19:17, etc. Although translations often render this word cross, many scholars agree that its basic meaning is actually upright stake. And that's true. It is true, just as the Jehovah's Witnesses website, jw.org, correctly states that the Greek word stauros did mean an upright stake. The basic, okay, hopefully, just 5 seconds, that's good. The basic meaning of the word stauros is upright stake. We're not going to disagree with that. It's not torture stake, as we've already established, and I think that we should not be arguing for torture stake. But I'm not going to argue with the many scholars who it must be stated remain unnamed in this specific quotation or statement by the Jehovah's Witnesses website. So I'm not going to disagree with these unnamed scholars on that point. It will be fully conceded that the Greek word stauros did originally mean stake. But that is the point here. It originally meant stake. But it very clearly later came to refer to the cross. Another example of what I would consider dishonesty can be found in the common citing of the book New Bible Dictionary by James Douglas Dixon, or James Dixon Douglas, J.D. Dixon. Many websites and the Jehovah's Witnesses literature make reference to this book and its commentary on stauros. All right. This is because the word stauros, so one site states, okay, I don't have that either. This is because the word stauros in both classical Greek and Koine carries no thought of a cross made of two timbers. It means only an upright stake, pale, pile, or pole. For some reason, I don't have that particular slide again. I do miss out one or two slides, but that was just on a one website. And it also states the Greek word for cross means primarily an upright stake or beam, and secondary, a stake used as an instrument for punishment and execution. So that's taken from Douglas' New Bible Dictionary of 1985 under cross on page 253. But as I say, that is deceptive on its own. They have simply taken one portion of that commentary because it seemingly supports their argument. All right, so that particular portion of that's taken from this book, the New Bible Dictionary, by J.D. Douglas, on page 253. But there's more. Unfortunately, that little bit that they quote, there is more. And it also states in that book, on page 253 as well, the noun occurs 28 times and the verb 46. The crucifixion of live criminals did not occur in the Old Testament. Stauro in the LXX of Esther 7:10 is the Hebrew tala, meaning to hang. Execution was by stoning. However, dead bodies were occasionally hung on a tree as a warning, as we've already kind of seen the allusion to. Such a body was regarded as accursed, hence Galatians 3:13, and that's actually stated it in there, and had to be removed and buried before Night King. This practice accounts for the New Testament's reference to Christ's cross as a tree, and so we actually see in this book the reference to that cross on to that crucifixion or the hanging on a tree. And again, like I say, that's on page 253. But we have even more. Apart from the single upright post, crux simplex, on which the victim was tied or impaled, there were three types of cross. The crux, commissa, St. Anthony's cross, was shaped like a capital T, though by some, thought by some to be derived from the symbol of the god Tammuz, which it's not. The letter tau, the crux, so we then also have the crux decussata, St. Andrew's cross, which was shaped like a letter X, which is possible. And the crux emissa was the familiar two beams, like in like a cross rather than the capital T cross, held by tradition to be the shape of the cross on which our Lord died. This is strengthened by the references in the four Gospels to the title nailed to the cross of Christ over his head. And on page 253 of that same book, we get that image of a crucifixion. Now that's the capital T. So obviously the traditional cross would have that little beam at the top above the head. So you have, so it's like so it is the traditional cross shape rather than T shape. But all of that comes from the same book as what was utilized in order to just show that stauros means stake. Well, we have a lot more information on the same pages or on the same page. So it's important that we go and have a look at that information and we actually look at the full amount of information. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses sometimes will point to Homer, a classical Greek poet who lived around the late 8th century or early 7th century BC, who used the word to mean stake, although other classical Greek writers could be cited. And it's so on the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, so the citation is at the bottom. Concerning this word and the word stauros, translated cross in some versions, the Companion Bible says on page 186 in the appendices, Homer, ancient Greek poet, uses the word stauros of an ordinary pole or stake, or a single piece of timber. And this is the meaning and usage of the word throughout the Greek classics. It never means two pieces of timber placed across one another at any angle, but always of one piece alone. Hence the use of the word exulon, meaning a timber, in connection with the manner of our Lord's death. The evidence is thus complete, that the Lord was put to death upon an upright stake and not on two pieces of timber placed at any angle. Now, it is factually correct that what they stated. We're not going to argue against what Homer utilized the word stauros. It's just pointless to argue against that. Homer used the word stauros to mean a stake in the Odyssey as well. Now, I didn't like the Odyssey. That wasn't I got really. I read them, read Homer just to read them, but I didn't like the Odyssey at all. It was a strange book for me. But anyway, he used Stavros in the Odyssey as well, and it meant a stake. But what we have to take into account is that Homer wrote in classical Greek. The Bible was not written in classical Greek. It was written in Koine Greek. We cannot simply take the meaning of the word in a different dialect, as in classical Greek, and insist that it must mean the same, or that it cannot also have a different or secondary meaning in a different dialect, namely Koine Greek. But what it does show is that Stavros did mean stake, and we're not arguing that Stavros meant stake. That's just not in argument. It's whether Stavros can also mean cross. The point previously referred to may be moot, as Stavros, it must be stated, does even today. It means that, yeah, it still means a stake. So we're not arguing against that. But it really is, I think, dishonest to say that the word can have no other meaning than the one first applied to it. Now, we know that the Romans later conquered the Greeks. This was done a long time after Homer, but also before the arrival of Jesus, the Messiah. Despite being under the authority of Empire, and my internet might be kicking out. All right, I shall wait. Yep, let's come back. Despite being under the authority of the Roman Empire, Greek remained the common language used by those that used to belong to the Grecian Empire. The Romans, however, did install much of their authority onto the people that they had now conquered, including the Roman means of punishment, namely crucifixion. Crucifixion in Latin is crucifixio. Crucifixion, and this is rather important, was not a part of Grecian custom. The Greeks did not utilize crucifixion. They didn't have, at that time, the punishment of crucifixion. And so they had no technical term for it because they didn't need it. So they had to come up with a term that would now suit the now new means of death. The Romans were crucifying people. They were crucifying people that spoke Greek, but there was no word in Greek for crucify or for crucifixion. So they didn't have this word. I mean, the English crucifixion comes from the Latin crucifixio. We just made it, we've anglicized it into crucifixion. The Greek language that did not have a word for crucifixion now required one, as crucifixion was a punishment that was being utilized by the Roman Empire, where the Greeks were, where the Greek was the common language. So while a word had to be derived for the crucifixion, it was also required that a word to refer to the object on which the crucifixion took place, which was most commonly a cross. Now, the Greek-speaking world had a few options open to them, just as today in modern languages when something new is introduced into our culture. So you can do one. You can invent a new word, like the word internet, for example, in the 1970s, that denoting a computer network connecting two or more smaller networks, from inter, reciprocal, mutual, and network, internet. So this is a new word. This never existed before that time. So that they could come up with a new word. Or they could use the Roman word either directly or Grecianizing it, like and so like what we do in English, like the crucifixion, crucifixio. We've just anglicized that, but we've done it. English has done that with many, many words. For example, the English word damsel, which doesn't really get used much anymore, but it's an anglicized word rendering of the old French word demoiselle. Okay, which is demoiselle in modern, young lady, basically. That's what it means. But the English word damsel is just an anglicized word that is taken from the French. So they could do that. So they could come up with a new word, or they could Grecianize the word. Or they could change the meaning of an already existing word. An example of the word completely changing meaning would be the word gay. Today, the word gay means a homosexual person. However, the original meaning of the word meant to be happy or cheerful. So when you utilize the word gay a long time ago, before it got taken as a word for a homosexual person, then it just meant to be happy or cheerful, basically. So let's take the 1941 film. Right, so this comes from 1941, and it's called The Gay Parisian. All right, the meaning of the word gay has changed since that film was made. It would be completely incorrect to take the modern understanding of that word gay and interject it back into the film that was made before the meaning of the word had changed. It would totally distort the true meaning of that film. The film has absolutely nothing to do with homosexuality whatsoever. Nothing. Okay, Wooly. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for being here. I shall hopefully see you again. You can obviously catch up with the last little bit of this this teaching on, if you want to come back and watch it on YouTube. Just catch up. There's not a huge amount of more to go now, to be honest. But thank you very much for being here. Now, the same would be true if we took the meaning of the word gay from 1941 and then we put it into the modern term gay, such as like LGBT. We would now have the meaning lesbian, happy, bisexual, transgender. Now, I'm sure that the LGBT community are happy, but that rendering would completely change and distort the actual meaning of the term. And this would again simply be an incorrect thing to do, as the word gay in that term, the LGBT, does not refer to someone being happy or cheerful. That's not what that means. Yeah, and queer as well. It's strange. People used to feel queer as in like it's a strange feeling, a bit weird, bit odd, and then it got utilized. So yeah, that's just another example. Now, fourthly, what they could have done is used a previously used word and then adding a new meaning to it, just like the word mouse. Mouse originally, and it still does, mean a small rodent that typically has a pointed snout, relatively large ears and eyes, and a long tail. But nowadays, it also has a second meaning, a small handheld device which is moved across a mat or flat surface to move the cursor on a computer screen. So what has happened is that a secondary meaning to a word has been added. The computer mouse was invented by Douglas C. Engelbart in 1964. and was publicly unveiled in 1968. Now, a previously used word with a totally different meaning was used for the computer mouse. They didn't utilize any of those other three ways that they could have done this. In this particular way, they just took a word and ran with that. Since the introduction of the computer mouse, the word mouse has had two meanings. And not understanding that the word has two meanings could lead to confusion. A non-functioning computer, or a pet mouse that doesn't really do much apart from sit in its cage. If someone said that they had just bought a new mouse for their computer, and you took it only the basic and original meaning of the word and applied it to their statement, you would get a completely incorrect understanding of what the person had just purchased. It would also work the opposite way. If they said that they had just purchased a pet mouse and you applied the modern meaning of the word, you're only going to confuse things, and the true meaning of the statement is going to get very mixed up. The thought of someone buying a computer mouse to keep in a cage as a pet is relatively funny, but if you want to do that, if you have a pet mouse, I think that one is better than if you buy a pet mouse and try to utilize that to actually run your computer. That could probably be considered as animal abuse. So don't do that. Don't buy a mouse, a computer mouse, and put it in a cage either. A bit strange. But this is how language adapts. It changes. The adaptation has been named by linguists as the diachronic development of languages. Is how it evolves over a period of time. Tracing the development of English from the Old English period to the 20th century is a diacritic study. That's when words change meaning. So I think, again, it's disingenuous to say that we can only take the basic meaning or the original meaning or even the modern meaning of a word and say that no other meaning should or can be applied to that usage of that word. In order to correctly understand the meaning of the usage of a word, we must allow the context in which the statement is made to dictate which meaning is being implied. Now, the Greeks chose to use a previously used word, stauros, and then they added a meaning to it. So stauros once meant steak. Now it means steak and it means cross. Cross was added to that word, to stauros. And from then on, stauros can mean steak or a cross, depending on the context in which the word was used. Now, anyone who seems to be in doubt what the word stauros means and what the Greeks themselves understood what stauros means or meant only needs to go look at a church building of the Greek Orthodox Church. And they will see a cross and not a stake adorning its exterior. The Greeks fully understood the word stauros to mean a device of more than one piece of timber, in this case in the shape of a cross. That's in Santa Sophia, the Greek Orthodox Cathedral of Hagia Sophia in London. Just in case anybody was interested to know what Greek Orthodox cathedral that actually is. So that's found in London. But it has a cross on. The Greek Orthodox Church has a cross. They utilize the cross. they speak Greek. They know what stauros means. But let's look at some biblical evidence. But there's not actually that much biblical evidence supporting the for the cross, apart from the translation of cross itself. But there are a couple of passages that make more sense, I think, that when we understand cross is being understood as the correct translation. Firstly, we have the comment of Thomas, who wanted to see the print of the nails, plural, in the hands of Jesus. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my fingers into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. Nails, indicating more than one nail, was used, because it's in the plural. The Greek is helion, or helion, and it's in the plural. So it's nails. There are more than one. And actually, the New World Translation, the Jehovah's Witness Bible, translates it utilizing nails. They have the plural there in that verse, in John 20:25. So they have the plural nails. They understand that this is plural, that there are more than one. Now, it would be unlikely that there would be two nails used if Jesus' hands were placed above him, above his head, on the stake. So his hands above his head. It would make more sense of just one nail being utilized through the hand. But now, right. We also have the wording regarding the placement of the sign at his crucifixion. His hands, had the hands of Jesus been placed up and above his head, then the passage regarding the placement of the sign at his death becomes rather confusing, I think. So, and set over his head his accusation written, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." One, it kind of implies that stake would have been a lot higher, so that there would be allowing a writing to go above his hands, because obviously if his hands are above his head, then this isn't over his head. It would make more sense that it would be to say that it was above his hands. I mean, it's not proof, but I think it's grammatically, it would make more sense to have said that, and his hands were placed above his head, and the accusation written above his hands. It makes more sense, but I mean, it's not proof, but I just think it makes a lot more sense. We can look at some of the language which is stated to Peter, and in John 21:18, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and walkedest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee whither thou wouldest not." So this is talking about Peter's crucifixion in himself. We understand that Peter was crucified upside down, or this is tradition that he was crucified upside down, and this would clearly show that crucifixion was being talked about, and that it would be the arms stretched out rather than so yeah, that's the nails, the piercings through his hands, the iron nails. He wanted to see the holes through the hands, basically, to prove that Jesus had been crucified upon the cross. Yeah, so Peter would my internet. Peter would have been with arms stretched out, so indicating like a crucifixion. So showing that crucifixion was certainly being utilized by the Romans, and not just not stakes. Now, probably the best support biblically for the cross, however, like I said, I think is where the cross was placed. And no, sorry, I've done where the cross was placed. The best biblical support for the cross is where we are told that Jesus carried his cross, and this is often overlooked, and its importance. So in John 19:17, and it says, "And he, bearing his cross, went forth into a place called the place of a skull, which is called in the Hebrew Golgotha." I'm sure that most people have seen pictures or the films that depict Jesus literally carrying the full cross on his back. And we see that in many, many films, that like Jesus dragging that cross, which is on his back. And but that's not what would have happened. Is not what would have been done, what Jesus would have actually carried at all. It's much more likely that this was a biblical reference to the very historically attested to form of Roman punishment known as patibulum, or crossbeam carrying or bearing, where the criminal would be forced to carry not the entire cross, but the cross beam of the cross on their back and shoulders through the city or public places. Now, this is historically attested. And this Bible verse definitely would kind of allude to that Jesus was carrying that cross beam anyway. And so that kind of gives us an indication that he was going to be crucified upon a cross. They didn't carry through the streets their stake, because the stake was already basically in the ground, already done, and it was just the beam that was carried, and then the beam was then placed and nailed upon the cross, or so the hole was dug, and the beam is the longer beam is already there, and then Jesus is carrying the cross beam now. Now, the Watchtower claims that the crux, which is the Latin translation of stauros, also meant a stake, and only later came to mean cross. And they say in the Watchtower, 15th of February 1960, the original meaning of the words stauros and crux were later expanded to include the cross, and we understand, and that's what I agree with. I fully agree. True, the Romans did use an instrument of execution known in Latin as the crux, and in translating the Bible into Latin, this word crux was used as a rendering of stauros, because the Latin word crux and the English word cross are similar. Many mistakenly assumed that crux was necessarily a stake with a crossbeam. Now, the English word cross is derived from the Latin word crux. That's true. The Jehovah's Witnesses claim that the T-shape was introduced much later in history. Constantine was a pagan worshipper of the sun god, and the symbol of this false god was the cross, or the letter T, the initial letter of the false god Tammuz. If what Constantine saw in the vision was a cross, then it was a sign of his god. For Jesus Christ was not hanged upon a cross, but was hanged upon a simple stake. It was from Constantine's time onward that the symbol of the apostate Christianity, which he professed to accept, was the cross. What has religion done for mankind? 1951, page 270. Now, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the T shape, because that's not really, I'm not that worried about that. But what I need to do is to show that, one, stauros was used to refer to the crux, the Roman instrument of execution, and two, the Roman instrument of execution, the crux, could consist of more than one piece of timber at a time, or at the time of the execution of Jesus. So when stauros was being used and crux was being used, it can be utilized of a two-pieced object, an object that has two pieces of wood at the time of Jesus, and it is not a later this Constantine, who gets blamed for a lot, Constantine. The crux referred to the instrument on which the Romans impaled their crucifixions, or implemented their crucifixions. The Romans didn't really have any particular preference to a shape, so we're not going to argue that, on which they performed their executions. They would execute using many different shapes, to be honest. The cross is just the norm, the one that we kind of know. The Romans called a single beam device a crux simplex, and a multiple beam device a crux compacta. The simple fact that the Romans had to distinguish between a single beamed crux and a multiple beamed crux clearly indicates that not all executions were performed on a single beam device. Neither were they performed on a device containing more than one beam, but remember, the Jehovah's Witnesses are claiming that it was never on a two beam, never utilized of something that has two beams. This just a martyr. So I am missing yet another one of my slides, but I shall read it again. So it's found on the Watchtower Online Library. The word cross appears in many English translations of the Bible, does not prove that Christ's death instrument was in the shape that the churches claim. The word cross stands for a number of shapes. There is simple upright stake, called in Latin crux, simplex. So the Watchtower, the Jehovah's Witness site actually understands this. The crux simplex, the crux commissa, which was shaped like the letter T, the crux decusata, which was shaped like the letter X, and the crux omissa, which was shaped like the letter T, but as in not in the capital T, but with the crossbar lowered. So it's like the cross as we understand it. So when the English word cross is used in Bible translations made by the churches, how are you to know which of these forms is meant? Well, we've already looked at why we understand it to be cross. Now, if we read on, we might find the reason behind the objection to the cross. And again, I don't have this bit. The Greek word from which the English word cross is translated, so we've got that, is translated by the churches as stauros, but to the Bible writers, it did not stand for the cross that churches display as the symbol of Christianity. It meant a plain upright stake. On this, the book, An Expository Dictionary of New Testament Words by W.E. Vine, states on page 256 of volume 1, stauros denotes primarily an upright pale or stake. On such, malefactors were nailed for execution. Both the noun and the verb stauro, to fasten to a stake or pale, are originally to be distinguished from the ecclesiastical form of a two-beamed cross. The shape of the letter had its origin in ancient Chaldea and was used as the symbol of the god Tammuz. So this is the crux of the problem, is that they think that it is being, that this cross of Jesus is actually the cross of Tammuz, and it's a pagan symbol, and so we can't use a pagan symbol because that's the understanding, and that's the real reason why the cross is being rejected, not because we shouldn't be using cross in worship or anything, or that stauros means stake. It's because the cross is a pagan symbol. That's the argument. Now what we now need to do, because it was introduced by Constantine, through his conversion, and right, and then it all comes in through 325, the Council of Nicaea, which gets blamed for everything. Anything that Christianity does wrong gets brought in through Constantine at the Council of Nicaea. Now, I'm not saying that the council wasn't wrong at any point, but it certainly had absolutely nothing to do with the cross. Absolutely nothing to do with the cross. So what we now need to do is just show that that the crux compacta was being used long time before. Long time before. So we have Justin Martyr. Let's go to Justin Martyr. For the one beam placed upright, from which the highest extremity is raised up into a horn, then the other beam is fitted onto it, and the ends appear on both sides as horns joined onto the one horn. So we have here Justin Martyr. He's not specifically making a reference to the cross shape, but he is definitely making reference to one beam and the other beam is fitted to it. This is 150 AD kind of time. Justin Martyr, clearly a two-piece instrument. Now, more importantly, though, to the argument is that there are historical writings that actually predate the death of Jesus that show that stauros was being used to describe the Roman instrument of execution. So the Greek historian Polybius, who lived from 200 to 118 BC, describing an event that occurred in 183 BC, states, all the baggage fell into the hands of the enemy, and Hannibal himself was made a prisoner. They, the Roman soldiers, at once took him up on the cross, Stauron, on which Spendius was hanging, and after the infliction of exquisite tortures, took down the latter's body and fastened Hannibal, still living, to his cross, Stauron, and then slaughtered 30 Carthaginians of high rank round the corpse of Spendius. So this is just showing that stauros was being utilized of the Roman form of execution. That's all I'm trying to do in this particular thing, is show that. So Polybius used the word stauron to refer to the instrument of execution used by the Romans. That's the important part. Chariton, writing somewhere between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, they found the others already hanging on their crosses, stauros, or staurus, and he was just mounting his cross. From far off, they each shouted appeals, "Spare him! Come down, do not hurt him, let him go." So the executioner stopped his work, and Carius descended from the cross, regretfully, for he had been glad to be leaving his miserable life and unhappy love. Again, so this is just showing that stauros is utilized of of the Roman form of execution. Philo of Alexandria, 250 BC to 50 AD, wrote about the instrument of execution, also using stauros. The relations and friends of those who were the real victims were led away to prison, were scourged, were tortured, and after all the ill treatment which their living bodies could endure, found the cross stauros the end of all, and the punishment from which they could not escape. So this is clearly referencing the form of which the punishment was being taken place by the Romans, and the stauros is being used for that. We also have Plutarch, 45 AD to around about 127 AD. But will you nail him to a cross with stauron, or impale him with a stake? Scolipsi pexius is that word. What does Theodorus care whether he rots above ground or beneath? So that's Plutarch. Plutarch not only referred to the instrument of execution by using stauros, he also differentiated the stauron from the stake. Now, although many other examples could be cited as evidence, the example that was already presented show adequate proof that the Greek stauron was being used to refer to the Roman instrument of execution. Not just at the time of Jesus, but also before it as well. So that's the important part. So what we now need to do is show that the Roman instrument of execution could include a cross, a device consisting of more than one piece of timber. Then it would provide ample support that stauros could be used to describe the instrument of execution used by the Romans that consisted of more than one piece of timber or simple stake. And it just happens that we have historical evidence to show that. Plautus, writing in sometime in the 254 to 184 BC, wrote in a play, and the Latin is up there, and so is the English. I suspect you're doomed to die outside the gate in that position, hands spread out and nailed to the patibulum. So we clearly have the hands spread out, nailed to a patibulum, 200 years at least before Jesus was crucified. Now, in another play that was written, it states, I'll give, and I don't have that one either. So that's another one of the slides not there. Anyway, in another play, it's Mostelleria. So you can find this, lines 359. It states, I'll give £200 to the first man to charge my crux and take it, on condition his legs and arms are double nailed, that is. That's a shame that I don't have that slide. Anyway, if you go to my website, www.followintruth.com, you can read all of this writing, study, and you can see all of these references. So you can just go and have a look at any time. Now, double nailed is another clear allusion to requiring more than one nail, which indicates the crux being a cross shape and not a single beam. And again, Plautus highlights the punishment of patibulum, the carrying of the crossbeam by the criminal and then being nailed to the crux. And again, I don't have this one, but it's Carbonaria, and it says, let him bear the patibulum through the city, then let him be nailed to the crux. So clearly we see that reference there. This should be, this is Seneca, 4 BC to around 65 AD. And it states, though they strive to release themselves from their crosses, those crosses to which each one of you nails himself with his own hand, yet they, when brought to punishment, hang each one on a single stipes. But these others who bring upon themselves their own punishment are stretched upon as many crosses as they had desires. Yet they are slanderous and witty in heaping insults on others. I believe that they were free to do so. Did not some of them spit upon spectators from their own patibulum? So we see this rendering here. Patibulum. Tacitus. Yonder I see crosses, not indeed of a single kind, but differently contrived by different peoples. Some hang their victims with head toward the ground, some impale their private parts, others stretch out their arms on a patibulum. No, sorry, this is Tacitus. The other one was Seneca again. So this is Tacitus. The soldiers stationed to supervise the tribute were seized and nailed to the patibulum. So we see lots of references to this patibulum. Lucian. Men weep and bewail their lot and curse Cadmus with many curses for putting tau into the alphabet. For they say that their tyrants, taking his body as a model and imitating his shape, have fashioned similar-looking timbers to crucify men upon them, and the vile device is even named after him, Stauros, Tau. Now, with all these crimes upon him, does not Tau deserve to die many times over? As for me, I think the only just thing to do would be to punish Tau on what has been made in his own shape. For the cross owes its existence to Tau, but its name to a man. And obviously, this refers back to the in some of the Tau, the T-shaped in the Greek. Now there are even more examples that can be used, which I'm not going to include now because we've been going for over 2 hours. But what has been shown is that the instruments of execution that consisted of more than one piece of timber were being used by the Romans at the time of Jesus. So it would then have to be shown by the Jehovah's Witnesses that another word, and not stauros, was used to refer to that particular instrument of execution, the two-piece. The argument that Jesus died on a stake and not a cross shape fails, I think, when it is examined in the complete detail. When we look at the full evidence and we look at some of the claims that are made and we look at what history actually states. And it just seems like the argument is against the T shape because of Tammuz rather than what actually history actually gives us and what history states. And so the argument against the cross is against this shape because of Tammuz. And I think that's the only argument that actually the Jehovah's Witnesses can have, is that it wouldn't be utilized on that T. But even if that T shape was Tammuz, it did represent Tammuz, it still wouldn't mean that Jesus could not have died upon a cross, and it wouldn't mean that this was brought in by Constantine in 325 whatever AD, because we have clear evidence from before Jesus was crucified that crucifixion was taking place by the Romans. They were utilizing the word stauros for that crucifixion, and that two pieces of wood were being used and also that patibulum carrying as well. So when we look at the full history, evidence, Bible, I think what we get is enough evidence to say that actually the cross is the shape on which Jesus died, and that the stake just really, to me, doesn't have any evidence for it, apart from the fact that Stauros used to mean stake, or can mean stake, and this T for Tammuz. But that's it. That's it for the study for tonight. I'm not going to go any more than that. So it's been a lot of information. All of the information that I've presented tonight is available on my website. So if you have got lost, or you want to go and study this in more detail, you can do so on my website. Feel free to do so. All the information is there free of charge. You can go and have a look. Tell me why I'm wrong. Go and have a look and show me the evidence that I presented. Look at some of the writings of what I've presented for on the Jehovah's Witnesses website. The links are all there on my website, so you will be able to find the exact page on the Jehovah's Witness website where you can find all of this information. And I would suggest going and having a look. And for the vast majority of Christianity, they're not going to have I did deal with the word exilon. I dealt with that at the beginning, right at the beginning of the study. It just means something that is made of wood. We dealt with that in the tree versus the cross. So, not sure. But yeah, feel free to tell me where I'm wrong, what you disagree with, why you don't agree. Like I say, for the vast majority of Christianity, with the Hebrew Israelites, I showed that it just means something made of wood rather than so I'm not really sure why I would need to deal with it again. And in your maybe you've got something that you would like me to look into, but as far as I understand, Xylon doesn't, it just means something made of wood. You're welcome. Thank you very much for being here. See you on Sunday. You can come with your questions. I'm not sure of your position because obviously other people were responding to you and to some of the comments you're making. I didn't see all of the comments. Yeah, of course you can come on. Yeah. Let me invite. As always, Vanessa, just you don't have to. You can turn your camera back off. I just need you to show me that obviously it's you, and you don't have to come on live. I won't bring you on until your camera's off if you don't want to have your face showing. But if you would like to, you're more than welcome. But yeah, Don, please come back. Thank you very much for being here. You made quite a lot of comments. So And I like I say, I will try to deal with your questions a little bit more detail on Sunday when we go specifically looking at that. At questions. Where have I gone? Oh, there you go. Right. Yeah, I did see. Hello, Dennis.
Hi, LJ.
Hello.
I have my camera off because I'm already in my pajama. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to. It just needs to, just in the background, just to show me that obviously it's you.
Okay,
Because
and you told me.
yeah,
You
yeah,
told me.
yeah,
Then
yeah. I saw you, and obviously I know it's you anyway now by the voice anyway.
okay,
So
that's fine.
I'm more than happy with with that. It's just I've just noticed more and more of this porn bombing happening on people's, especially on Christian on Christian sites. It's happened to a few, and I actually know now of a couple of people that have actually lost their YouTube channel completely because of it. In the past, I think YouTube kind of are on it a little bit more now, and they're being a bit more lenient because obviously they are aware of it. But in the past, people have had their channels completely closed down because of it. So
Okay.
yeah, it's a thing that seems to be happening for some. That's the world we live in, where you can't even invite people to come on and chat with you on your chat.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have fear of them doing certain things on your channel. Okay, so obviously that was a quite a long presentation.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I learned something from you because I didn't know that that our view changed
Right.
around
Okay.
the 1930s.
Yeah.
That we used to use the King James version, and that says cross.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because when they realized, it seems for me that they realized, okay, the cross is not necessarily a cross. That might have been one of the reasons that they made their own translation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like I said, as I showed, I think that one of the reasons is that they've utilized this argumentation of Tammuz, the cross of Tammuz, and so
Yeah,
the cross of
I think
Jesus.
I think they did because they don't want to follow pagan practices, and that's why they were a bit afraid of the cross, and
Yeah. Yeah.
their tendency would go more to the stake than to the cross.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can I can see that.
Okay. So let's take away this Tammuz thing, because like I don't I need to do that anyway. More of a study to actually present a study on the cross of Tammuz, because this cross of Tammuz is the problem with it is it comes a lot from the made up mind of certain writers, but rather than historical fact. But let's take away the cross of Tammuz. Let's take away that as being an argument.
Hmm. Um, Actually, the main reason why we don't say it's a cross is the word xylon, the Greek word that
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
in Acts 5:30,
yeah.
and Peter and Paul uses that word. And the word xylon, I know that in Bible Hub they translate it as how do they say, a bar, horizontal bar.
Well, in I'd have to go. I have to find it now. Let me bring it up. So that's right at the beginning. It just means something made of wood. That's the meaning of it. Let me find. Yeah, xulon. It just means
The
anything made of
crossbar.
wood. Yeah, a piece
Yeah.
of wood, a club, a staff, the trunk of a tree, used to support the crossbar of a cross in crucifixion.
Yeah,
So
and we
it's
would not agree with the last part here, used to support the crossbar of the
yeah.
cross in crucifixion.
I don't even. To be honest, you could remove that. It still wouldn't. To me, it still wouldn't. It wouldn't deny the cross, because the cross would be made of wood. So it's just anything that is made of wood. So to me, that doesn't really diminish the idea that it could be a cross, just because you
Yeah,
remove that
you said it
understanding.
could be. You said it could be a cross. And so, what would be the evidence for a cross? You said a lot of things about why it is not only a stake, as some Jehovah's Witnesses said, but
Mm-hmm.
what would you say that it has to be a cross and not a stake?
Well, I think I presented a lot of evidence of why I think that it is a cross rather than a stake. I think the fact that the Greek Orthodox Church utilizes a stake, the fact that Stauros was utilized of the Roman device of a of not crucifixion but execution. Sorry, the device of execution, and that we have the fact that we have early writers that write utilizing two pieces of wood. The fact that it's something made of wood, the fact that history tells us that it was a cross. All the words, the crux used in Latin. I just think that the evidence is kind of like the nails, the stretching out of the arms of Peter. I just think that the evidence is beyond the evidence for the stake is minimal. It has to be that, like, we're just taking an original word, the original word stauros, and saying, well, it means cross, it means stake, and exulon means something made of wood, and that seems to be the argument. And it's not taken into account any of the other historical evidence that would say that Jesus was killed upon a cross. It's denying all the rest of the evidence, as far as I'm concerned.
In my view, everything you said just proves that it could be also a cross, and it is not only a stake. It could be a cross.
Yeah,
And because,
like I said,
sorry.
Yeah, there are two possibilities: that it is a stake or it is a cross. And I think that the overwhelming evidence, right? It could be a cross, it could be a stake, but the evidence pushes towards the cross. So I would say that I would utilize the cross with the possibility that it could be a stake, but the fact is that it isn't just Catholics that have rendered and understood that Jesus died on a cross. This is hundreds and this is thousands of years old. Like, this is just something that too many people have. And that's appeal to it. That's really wrong, because that's appeal to the bandwagon type thing. But the evidence and the renderings of what people have rendered this to be and understood this to be indicates to me that it would take a lot more than just saying, well, it's something made of wood and stauros can mean stake, for me to go against the evidence for it. It would take a lot. That's not to me compelling evidence that it was a stake. I think the word torture at the beginning in the Jehovah's Witness Bible derails from the argument, and it just automatically makes me go, well, that is clearly incorrect. So
we go more with the meaning and not with the exact Greek word. So stake, he was tortured. It's implemented that he was tortured by saying
he wasn't tortured on the cross, though. He was tortured before he got on the cross. He was killed on the cross. So I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't why, if you want to put a word in there, why it just wouldn't be death stake.
The translators of our translation did that, so I just have to deal with what they did. So I'm not sure if I would have done it, and I don't know if I would have said cross or stake. Probably with the knowledge I have today, I would have said stake because of the word xylon. But that, as you said, it's not a theological point of where your salvation depends on it. But
I don't think that it necessitates that like our salvation is going to depend on whether Jesus was killed on a cross or the stake. I think it does bring into doubt certain things, whether we can trust the renderings in our Bible. Obviously, we're using two different Bibles.
Bible translations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bible well, no, because we are utilizing two different Bibles, to be honest. Because
okay, you mean Textus Receptus and
because I utilize I have a King James. That's my Bible, is the King James, and so I am utilizing the Textus Receptus rather than the critical text. Now I'm not sure exactly what critical text your Bible is translated on. Let me.
The Westcott and Hort.
Is it all the way back to the Westcott and Hort translation? Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have an original 1961 New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures.
Okay, there was a revision in 2013, but
so I'll look into the exact text that it was utilized from. But if it's the Westcott and Hort, the Westcott and Hort has been because obviously that was the first the start of basically the modern renderings and understanding. So you have the Westcott and Hort, and then you start going into the Nestle-Aland translations, and we're up to 28 edition, the Nestle-Aland 28 edition there. So this is similar, but not the same as the underlying text for the what would be yours. This is the 27th edition, which is this one, is the one that most modern versions of the Bible are translated from, this 27 edition.
Okay.
Some are translated from the 28, but that will be different than yours.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's been updated and new manuscripts have been found that support that reading, the reading of the critical text thing. So but yours is updated in 2013. Are there differences?
A few differences. According to the word nefesh, for soul is not rendered soul anymore, but person in I think Genesis 2:7. when
Okay.
Adam became a living person, not a living soul.
Okay.
But it says in the footnote, it says then in the original, it says nefesh, which is soul. And a few other things were simplified.
Right.
Not the exact Greek rendering is used anymore, but how you would understand it as an English-speaking person.
Okay. So, and was that updated utilizing the Westcott and Hort text, or is that now utilizing the
I think
Allen text?
I think it's still the Westcott and Hort, but I'm not totally sure. But I think it's still Westcott and Hort.
Okay, so Westcott and Hort text is 1881, around about that kind of time. Not sure the exact date. 1881, I think.
I don't know actually.
Yeah, let me find that out. Bible Hub. Let me see the Westcott and Hort text. So should be. Let me see. I need New Testament Mark. Let's go into there. Greek. Yeah, 1881. Sometimes I question myself, but I was correct. 1881.
Mm-hmm.
So your Bible is utilizing that particular text, even though that particular text has been updated basically 28 times and more than that since then. There's because obviously they're two different texts. The Textus Receptus hasn't been updated, whereas the Westcott and Hort text, which is now basically the Nestle-Aland text, gets updated. I mean, like I say, it's on version 28 at the moment, and they're working on version 29. Would you not have an issue that there may be problems with that translation if there's updates which are happening on a regular basis?
Perhaps I don't know the real differences, but you said the Textus Receptus was not updated, but isn't there a 1550 Stephanus Textus Receptus and then a Scrivenus Textus Receptus from 1894?
So
I have Bible Hub open here.
Yeah, so the Textus Receptus, right, okay, was started by Erasmus. He produced 5 editions of it. Then we go to Stephanus and Beza, all produced renderings of the Textus Receptus, and then the King James version is the final Textus Receptus. It's the Textus Receptus in English, basically. They never actually released the Greek text that they produced in order to do the King James version in English. So I understand the King James version as being a Textus Receptus text in English. It has approximately 20-ish small differences than the final edition of Beza. Now, Scrivener, when he his Textus Receptus is actually a back translation of the KJV. So he translated the King James version because the underlying Greek text was never released, and I'm not even sure that they actually produced a Greek text. To be honest, they utilized the final edition of Beza mainly, and then they just produced the English translation. Scrivener, because there wasn't a Greek text that underlies the KJV, he then took the King James Bible and back translated it into Greek. and that's his textus receptus. So it's a
Okay, interesting.
it's a back translation. So that translation, that textus receptus of 1894 is not what I utilize. It's not it's not what I would consider a textus receptus. It's just a translation. It's a translation of the textus receptus.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And
I wouldn't utilize that.
Is there a difference between the textus receptus and the Westcotton, Netherland, Ireland, according to the Stauros and the Xylon, or is that
So no, I would understand that. Like, so both would utilize Stauros, and both would utilize, as far as I know, both utilize Xylon. In those verses, so that wouldn't become down to a difference in the manuscripts or difference in that's a translation difference, because
it doesn't influence our topic today.
Yeah, that particularly wouldn't. Although, like I say, most modern versions of the Bible they utilize the Nestle-Aland text. So if you get something like a New English Bible, this one, or the Revised Standard Bible, so something like that, the NEB, that is going to be rendered off of the Nestle-Aland text, not off of the Textus Receptus. And that has, and I'm pretty sure that this will have cross. So it is utilizing, so it's the translation difference there. So although these Bibles are utilizing the same text or a similar text as what yours would utilize, they're translating Stauros differently, even though they're utilizing your the same text, or the text that yours is kind of yours originates from.
And some translate even Xylon as cross, I think.
They would, because what they would then be doing is not a literal translation. They would be doing what your Bible, what you said with the torture, is understanding what that is and then inserting it. So they would translate the Xylon as a cross, understanding that it's already a cross, and so that is not a literal translation. That just becomes a meaning translation. It means a cross, because obviously, like I say, I understand hanging on a tree as being hung upon a cross, so it would be the same thing. So they've just changed it from a literal translation.
Yeah, sure. That's okay.
Yeah, so I'd be okay with that. I personally, I would say we should do more literal translation, and we should say that it was hanging on a tree. But to be honest, if you're going to go literal translation, it should be hung upon something made of wood. Doesn't quite have as flow, but it's or placed upon something made of wood. That would be my understanding of what Xylon means. And in that sense, those verses are not supporting a cross, because it's just saying that something is supported upon something that is made of wood. And it would already obviously have to be understood that was talking about the cross, in order for that to then mean a cross, because Stauros or cross or crux are not utilized in the Greek or Latin in those particular verses. So yeah, when it comes to, like I say, still when it comes to the stake, I do have an issue with torture stake, although I understand the why they've included it. I think it's wrong. because we don't have torture cross, we don't call it torture cross, and we don't call it a death cross. It's just cross, is because that's the correct rendering of what it means. And I also think that the evidence for a stake is simplistic. It's really just saying, well, something that is made of wood, and Stavros has the definition stake, and so we're going to go with stake. Whereas all of the other information that has been presented that shows that there were two pieces of wood being utilized by the Romans. Stauros was being utilized for the word, for that instrument of execution. The fact that we know from history, from historical writings, we have the petulum carrying, and this is what is shown in the description in Luke, with Jesus carrying that cross through the streets. That wasn't done for somebody that was being crucified or killed upon a stake. This was the crossbeam that was then put attached to that. And so with all the information, with the above the head, this I find really strange. There would have to be a lot of room above for the hands to be placed above, and then the sign. But the Bible statement that the cross was placed above his head, not above his hands. The fact that the Bible utilizes nails, plural, I just don't think that there's enough evidence to say that we shouldn't be utilizing cross. I think that we should be utilizing cross with maybe a possibility of stake, rather than saying, well, it is stake. It is a stake. I mean, that's a definitive, and I just don't think the evidence there supports that position. So,
okay, I accept your position.
Yeah. So that's.
I would say I tend to stake, but would also accept a cross. So it would be
at least
somehow
you're willing, not that point. At least you're willing to say that there is a possibility that it was a cross rather than a stake, and not holding that it must be 100% that it has to be a stake. Like a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that I have spoken to will say that there's basically no budging on that it was a stake. And actually, one of the arguments, or to me, one of the main arguments that I've come across from people utilizing it is the Tammuz cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I agree. I learned. I know people. I know Jehovah's Witnesses who really say it was a stake and it cannot be a cross. So,
yeah.
But that's not really what our literature says, I think.
Yeah. What the literature doesn't say that it can't be a cross?
It has explicitly be a stake and it cannot be a cross. I don't think that our literature has that.
Right. Okay. I think that there are, again, I think that there were strong. Let me see if I can. There were strong arguments that it can't be, that it has to be. So. Let me find. me find the one that I'm trying to find. Okay, so this one where it says the critical lexicon and concordance to the English and Greek New Testament, stauros never means two pieces of wood joining each other at any angle. I would disagree with that.
They quote a critical lexicon there, not from their own literature. They just mentioned that this lexicon quote has that opinion, I think.
Yeah, and it says that like a critical lexicon. It doesn't say which one it is, so we can't check which one it is. And it says that stauros never means two pieces of wood joining each other. Well, that is making a specific statement that so we don't know which lexicon that is. So I'd have a look at that. But we do have lexicons that clearly show otherwise.
You presented evidence that there are lexicons who say otherwise. So I would accept that. And I would only see that, as I said, as mentioning that this lexicon has that opinion, and that's why it might have been a stake.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to be a stake.
So let me find. So that might be the one.
It's possible that I missed something because your presentation was pretty long, but I cannot remember everything, and I cannot remember where it says explicitly it has to be a stake.
Yeah. Okay, I'll have to go back through it and find that. Well, okay, I'll accept it that the literature is not saying that it 100% has to be a stake, and that you are. So, would you say that you are? Okay, so you obviously have New World Translation, and it says stake, torture stake. Mm-hmm. Are you? What was what point am I trying to ask you? What was the question? So when it says torture stake, are you open to the fact that that is not a torture stake, and that the Jehovah's Witness translation is actually an error?
Am I open? That's a difficult question.
But if because you said that obviously you said obviously that you're open to the fact that there is a possibility that it can mean cross, and that there is no explicit statement that says that the Jehovah's Witnesses have to believe that it was a cross, was a stake. So is there a possibility that could be wrong? Stake could be wrong in the Jehovah's Witness Bible?
Sure. There is a possibility, of course. I would agree. That's a possibility that, for example, when new Bible manuscripts would have been found, or if they search for some, I guess they don't search really for them, but if
we still find manuscripts today. We're still finding manuscripts all over the place. They're not as common as what they used to, what they have been in the past, but manuscripts are still found today.
It might be possible that we have to improve our translation because new manuscripts are found.
Yeah, the thing with that is that I don't think that finding new manuscripts is going to change it, because because we're not talking about a difference between a Greek word. The Greek word is the same. So in your underlying Greek text and my underlying Greek text for the King James Version, it is stauros. So even if we found another manuscript today, which was, say, of Matthew 27:40, it would still read stauros, or it may let's say that it did read something else. Actually, that would be an anomaly. It's not going to read anything that would change our understanding of what Jesus died on. He died on a stauros. It's the understanding of what that word means that we differ on.
Yeah, sure, sure. I was not
Interest.
talking about stauros or xylon. We have
Okay.
these words, but
Okay.
if anything else would be found that made it explicitly clear that it was a
Yeah.
cross.
Right. Okay. Okay. What would make it explicitly clear that that it was a cross?
For example, when a new verse of Matthew 27 would have been found where it says there was a horizontal bar and a vertical bar, something like that. Or I don't know.
Right. Okay. So that's not going to happen, because that's not how they described. That's not how those verses were rendered. It was.
Yeah.
Is just rendered stauros. So that's is there is so there's literally going to be no manuscript that is going to state that. So when we have, like, would you hold to the fact that it was that the cross became pivotal when through Constantine, or would you disagree with that?
I'm not totally sure that it was Constantine, but the cross was never used by the first Christians in the first centuries, as far as I know.
So the cross as like an image wasn't utilized. No, you're right. So the cross is something that, like an image, that is being utilized. But I mean, we go back to Justin Martyr from 150 AD, who references two pieces of wood. So that's from 150 AD. So we have the early church writer that utilizes two pieces of wood. So that's clearly a long time before Constantine.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was let's see if I can. So what about that? What about the Greek Orthodox Church? Why are they utilizing a cross? Are they misunderstanding Stauros, or are they just following tradition?
I don't know. How old is Greek Orthodox Church?
So the Greek Orthodox Church.
When did they arise or come up?
Let's see. So, 1st century AD.
Oh, okay, that's early.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's.
I've never looked into that. So
yeah, let me confirm that. Let me confirm that. That I'd have to confirm. This seems relatively early. That might even seem a bit too early for me.
And did they have the cross already in the first or 100 AD?
I as you say, not sure when the cross actually started to be utilized in certain church in all the different denominations of the church. So
the image looks pretty modern for me. So
I mean, well,
it's
this church is obviously is new and is a modern church, but the cross is clearly something that they are utilizing. And like I say, would you understand that they are just doing that through tradition, or is that something that they're understanding the Greek, their own Greek language?
perhaps they copied from the Catholics, but that's just an idea. I don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's.
And as you said, even the Jehovah's Witnesses in the beginning of the 20th century believed it was a cross.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they had the cross as a symbol and at the top of the watchtower.
yeah, yeah. They definitely used to utilize the cross. So yeah, there's Justin Martyr talking about the one beam being fixed to the other. So
And
that's
is that about Jesus, or is that about
it's
Roman
about
crucifixion?
Roman crucifixion.
Yeah, okay. But then you have no evidence according to Jesus.
Well, he's obviously writing about about Jesus in the sense that he's defending Jesus being crucified, and he's writing about. He doesn't say that, like, obviously Jesus was crucified upon this. He's just writing that this is the. I mean, you'd have to go and have a look at the context of it, but he's definitely writing that there is an implication of two pieces of wood being utilized within crucifixion.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I say, we have a lot of early writings to show that Stauron was being utilized of the Roman method of execution, and we have early writings before and around the time of Jesus to say that that Roman execution included often utilized two pieces of wood. Now, like I say, the fact that we have this stauros being used of a Roman execution, and that we have early writings to say that they were utilizing the cross, I think that, along with all of the other evidence that I see, I think that it would take a lot more than just saying, well, one of the definitions of stauros means stake, and exulon means something made of wood. Because on the cross side, we have the exact same argument. We have, well, stauros can mean cross, and crosses are made of wood. So we have the exact same argument.
Yeah, but
we have all of the other historical attestation to go along with it.
But a cross, of course, cross can be made of wood, but a xylon always is only one bar and not a second bar.
I don't think that's factual. You would have to now demonstrate, despite the fact that Strong's says otherwise, which is a Greek concordance lexicon, which states opposite of what you just said. So now you would have to present information and evidence that shows that an exulon can only be utilized of something made of one piece of wood.
Okay, what does the Strong dictionary say exactly?
Let me bring that up. Let me actually bring that up. Give me 1 second. So let's go to Matthew 27, 40. Let's just utilize, as we've already utilized Matthew 27:40 quite often. I'll use that. So, oh no, that's cross, isn't it? Acts. That's one.
Acts 5:30.
Yeah, Acts 5:30. I'm looking at the wrong verse. Okay. So I want to present, share screen, share. You should be able to see that now. Can you see?
Yeah, I have it on my screen as well, so I have it in.
All right. Okay. So it just says anything made of wood, a piece of wood, a club, staff, the trunk of a tree, used to support the crossbar of a cross in crucifixion. So there is a possibility. You're right. I would agree that there is from that. That you could say that was only one piece of wood.
So we agree that Stavros can have that meaning of a second bar,
Yeah.
but xylon does not. And that's why.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. And let's have a look at Thayer's.
And there is a passage in the Septuagint in Ezra 6:10.
Yeah,
I think it's Ezra 6:10, where xylon is used in the translation of the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah, I don't utilize the Septuagint because I don't give any authority. I don't give any authority to the Septuagint at all.
Okay, then.
But no, it is interesting to know. Mm-hmm. Oh, Strong's. That's not Thayer's. I'd have to go and have a look at Thayer's as well. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that. But on that basis, it seems to support more the likelihood that it is actually is not the petibulum. It is the bar of which the petibulum is attached to.
Of course, it is possible that Peter and Paul, when they used xylon, that they just referred to the one bar of the cross.
It is possible, yeah. So, do you have any historical evidence that would show that people that that when they were being crucified on one piece, a one-piece bar, that they
I'm sure there's literature, but I haven't looked deeper into it.
Okay, so you would obviously need to present that. You'd have to present some evidence that said that when people were crucified upon this one piece of wood, that they had to carry that as well.
I just check if I find something I just type in cross.
Because that would need to be demonstrated that they were being forced not to carry just the petibulum, the crossbeam, but they were actually being forced to carry the stake, basically. If they're being killed upon a stake, that they would have to carry their stake. Because obviously we do get Jesus having to carry the cross, so you would have to show that that meant that they carried their stake. I actually, there was a guy that I used to talk to. He's blocked me now. He doesn't talk to me anymore. But he actually did his own translation of the Bible, and he rendered he had stake in these instead of cross, and he actually changed his Bible translation to cross after reading my writings on that, and actually cites me.
Okay.
But, yeah,
so well done.
I mean, I'm not using that as proof. I'm just saying that, like, I can convince somebody.
So you did a good job.
Yeah, he literally changed his translation because of me. We disagreed on something else. He blocked me. He ended up blocking me because we disagreed on something else, on the translation of hell, of what hell was. So yeah.
Okay. Another interesting.
Yeah, and one day I will do that as well. But he disagreed with me on that, and because we disagreed, he decided that was it. He wasn't ever going to speak to me again. But I get blocked a lot, so I'm not bothered.
Okay. So far, I didn't block you.
No, but I'm sure that there are many people that do, just on the basis that I specifically on my Unitarianism. I'm getting tired now. It's coming up to 1 o'clock for you now, isn't it?
I can give you a link to a question from readers where it says, "Did the Israelites execute criminals by hanging them on stakes?" Question, and it was answered by the governing body.
Okay, yeah, send me that. That wouldn't prove that the Romans made during their execution. Because obviously, it wasn't the Israelites that crucified Jesus. It was the Romans. So you would. I'd be still interested. Pass that link over. That's fine. I'll have a look. But yeah, you would still have to show that it was a Roman form of in their executions. They made people carry the stake, not the crossbeam. They made them carry the stake, which is possible. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I haven't seen it, but then probably I wouldn't be looking so hard for it. So, but yeah, you would that would then support your position, because the Bible states that Jesus carried the cross. So you would now have to show that Romans made criminals carry the stake and not just the crossbeam. Because we know that we have historical attestation, as I've already shown, that criminals carried the crossbeam.
Yeah,
and as a counter argument to that, you would need to show that it wasn't just a crossbeam that they carried; they carried the stake as well.
Okay.
So that would be a counter argument to that, and maybe you'll be able to find that.
Okay, I will have a look the next days.
And obviously, if you do, let me know, and I'll look into it.
Mm-hmm.
So nails. How would you understand that? Why would multiple nails be used?
There has to be something about the nails as well. I remember I read something about the nails, but I didn't pay too much attention. As you correctly said, our translation also has the plural, the nails.
Mm-hmm.
And where are they? Where are they? Nails. Much time. I have to look where we have something.
Yeah, so you'd have to show the nails and explain why plural nails were being used there.
Yeah, it must have been a very thick nail to go through both hands at the same time. So we just think they are next to each other, the hands.
So basically, above the head is in that kind of position, yeah, rather than like
Yeah,
this.
I think so. I think I have seen a picture of the watchtower. You found a lot which I never saw before, so perhaps you can look for it as well, and you will find plenty of pictures, I think, where Jesus has his hands above his head.
Mm-hmm. I literally have that.
But I didn't check where the nails exactly were.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, I'd have to I'll go back and have a look at the publications and see whether I can find that better. Okay, and so again, how would you understand the hands above the head and the inscription being written above Jesus's head? Is that just a technical term because it technically is above his head?
Yeah, it would be above his hands and his head.
Okay. It says above his head. Would that be just be? Is that just the way that it was recorded? It does. It's not. It wouldn't mean that it couldn't be above the hands. I just think it's a bit strange that it's not recorded above the hands and head of Jesus, or above the head, or above the hands. Just only is above the head.
I have something here. January 21, 2011. That is, what is that? Jesus was executed on a cross, not a stake. Okay.
That's not your Watchtower Society on that, is it?
But that's what the heading says. But the picture shows a stake. Actually, it shows 3 stakes with the 2 criminals beside Jesus, and in the middle it's Jesus with the sign, with the hands. Perhaps I can wait just a moment. Do you see it?
Yeah, I've got that image on my website there. Can't really see too low.
And
But
the
that
sign above
image,
the hand.
yeah. Can you see my screen?
I can see it now. Yeah.
Yeah, that same image is there. If on the right hand side, that same image that's on my website. There are
Oh, yeah.
two images there. Yeah.
So the sign is above the head and above the hands.
Yeah, I can see that, but I'm on about the grammar, the technicality of how it's written. That it is above the head rather than above the hands or above the hands and the head. It just records it above the head, which if the hands are stretched above the head, it seems a strange way of recording it, I would say.
Okay.
I'm not sure why it would just say above the head, because technically it's above the hands.
And yeah, okay. It's also above the hands, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're getting into small technicalities and not proof, but I just think that all of these little bits of evidence about the Peter with his arms stretched out, I just think that the Bible with the carrying of the cross, that where the nails, the placement of the recording of the placement of the sign, Peter's having his arms stretched out. I just think that these are all small indications that the cross is correct. The fact that the Jehovah's Witnesses have used to believe that, they used to utilize the cross. It just seems like to me that the reason for rejection of it doesn't come from evidence. It comes from a rejection of not wanting to utilize pagan symbols, and it not being understood that actually the cross of Tammuz is not pagan anyway, because it's not the same thing, and it's not historically supported, that argument. So
yeah,
and,
I would definitely agree. I would definitely agree that that this played a role for abandoning the cross. That it has become an idol, and that is actually the most important thing that we have to beware of, to have the cross as an idol, and
that surely shouldn't be a reason to reject it there. Just because certain denominations have turned it into an idol wouldn't be the basis on which to reject it. The rejection of turning it into an idol, which I certainly would be 100% with you on that basis. I'd definitely be with you on the basis of not turning the cross into a worship item, or that I'm going to be in agreement with. But that alone is not enough to say to me that.
Sure, I agree. I agree. It's not enough, but because when it says God is Almighty, and we find something that this is of somebody else is also was seen as Almighty, then God cannot be Almighty because someone pagan has been Almighty. Then that would not be a reason to reject it. But so I agree with you so far. But yeah, the 3c in our translation, the appendix, it says there's not enough evidence that it was a cross.
Okay, so there isn't enough evidence that it is a cross, but the evidence certainly doesn't outrule it. So it seems strange, like I said, because there isn't the traditional side, what you have to start with is right. You say tradition says that he was crucified upon a cross. We have historical evidence that crucifixions were being performed upon a cross. We have biblical attestation that would lead to a possibility that it is that there are certain implications, as I've stated, that might lead to a cross. In order to reject the cross, you need severe evidence. It's not the opposite. It shouldn't be the opposite way round, in my understanding. If you have a position that is traditional, is supported by evidence,
can I say something?
You shouldn't be rejecting that for a different position without severe evidence to the contrary, to that position.
Your first point was tradition says it was a cross.
Yeah.
And from what time is that tradition?
The tradition goes all the way back until, like, well, we have, like I say, writings from the 2nd century.
I mean, according to Jesus, the case of Jesus, not if there were somewhere criminals were crucified on a cross.
People were writing that he died upon a stauros as far back as the first and 2nd century. It's that understanding what stauros is that you've got the issue with. But what I'm saying is that if the vast majority of people are saying that it was a cross, if we have all of this information, for you to reject that, it is you that needs to, like okay, let's say, right, the world was once believed to be flat. All right. Mm-hmm. It takes, in order, that's the traditional understanding. That's the belief. In order to reject that, you're going to need to come up with some evidence to prove that what is originally stated is wrong, or what was traditionally believed is wrong. And you cannot just come around and draw a picture of a round circle and say, well, that's the shape of the earth. You can't do that. You can't say, well, it can't be, the tradition is wrong, it's got to be a circle. You need to present evidence for that and say why you, and it needs to be not just possible, it needs to be severe evidence, and that changes people's views and changes people's beliefs. It's on you, if you're postulating a different position than what is generally accepted, it's on you to present the evidence. You have the burden of proof in order to and I'm not saying that can't be done, because like I say, tradition says that Jesus died on a Friday. I think I presented a huge amount of evidence to say that Jesus didn't die on a Friday. He died on a Thursday, possibly a Wednesday, but I don't agree with that, but certainly not Friday. And I presented a huge amount of evidence. Just saying that, well, one of the meanings of stauros can be state, I don't think is giving enough evidence in order to say that the normal understanding, the traditional understanding, is wrong. You have to present enough evidence to change somebody's mind. You can't just change it. You can't just say, well, one of the meanings is steak, so that's what it is.
I would come from the same. How do you say that? I start differently. I would say actually the very same as you do, just the other way around. because the original meaning of stauros is a stake. It was in the classical Greek. It was a stake.
Yeah,
And
and classic is different than Koine Greek.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It says here in our literature in 3c, it says in the classical Greek, the word stauros meant merely an upright stake or pale or a pile, such as is used for a foundation. The verb stauro meant to fence with pales, to form a stockade or palisade.
But you can't force the classical Greek meaning back into the Koine Greek.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're not the same.
In you think in the Koine Greek, stauros is a cross? Or
I think that
it's only a cross.
I believe that in Koine Greek, stauros can mean both.
Okay, it can mean both. So
yeah,
we agree on that.
Right. Okay. And because of that, and because of the way that the evidence has supported the fact that it was a cross, it is on you carry the burden of evidence to prove otherwise. And I think that I've presented a lot of evidence to show that to support why cross should be the correct understanding, and to just say, well, originally stauros might have meant or meant stake is not enough evidence.
Now, it's not enough evidence, sure, but when you say it originally meant stake, then you tried to prove that it can also mean cross. But I think you only presented evidence for the possibility that it can mean cross.
No. I presented evidence to prove that it does mean cross. It does have the both meanings. It has meaning cross and it has the meaning stake. I didn't present the evidence that I presented didn't make a case that there's a possibility that stauros means cross. Stauros means cross. There is no arguing over whether stauros means cross. It does mean stake. The difference, what the argumentation is whether stauros, in the context of the biblical usage, is stake or cross. It means cross. There is no arguing over that. It means cross. You just cannot argue with that. We have historical uses of it being used of the torture implementation device that carried two pieces of wood. It carried two pieces of wood. Whether you want to call that an X shape, T shape, it doesn't matter. It has two pieces of wood. All right. And in the lexicons, stauros means cross. It has the meaning cross. There's no arguing over that. The argument is over which rendering is the correct rendering. And because cross has always been what is being understood, it is now on the change to present enough evidence to show that we shouldn't be understanding this as cross, but we should be understanding it as stake. And just saying, well, it has the meaning stake, so that means that we should understand it as stake, is not enough evidence to present. Because all you're doing is saying, we've got two meanings, and I'm not going to present any other evidence apart from the fact that it has two meanings, and I'm going to use this meaning.
That I presented my view already about the xylon. The xylon is only one piece of wood, and that's why we say, okay, it's possible that it might have been a cross, but xylon points more to a stake. Okay. That's actually the argument of our literature also.
Right. So you would understand that it's more based upon exulon. So you would understand that the two main arguments upon Zulon and the Tammuz cross.
The Tammuz, that's not really an argument that I would use.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
But that's in our literature, sure.
Okay. So now, like I say, what you would need to do, like if you wanted to, and I'm not, you're not doing a presentation, and I understand that you're not doing that. And actually, maybe I should have shown this. But in order to say that exulon can only be utilized, is utilized of the piece of wood that Jesus would have died on, you will now have to show, and like I say, feel free to go back and we'll speak on another video. You now need to show that the exulon was carried by criminals.
I will have a look at that.
Because we know for a fact that the petibulum was carried by criminals through the cities. So now, but this is the cross beam that attaches to the other beam. So now what you would need to show is that there is historical evidence that criminals were forced to carry this exulon, the stauros, the stake, through the city, and it wasn't the crossbeam.
If you can show that,
we'll have some. That would definitely offer some support.
Okay.
Without it, you'd have to explain why there is no evidence to support that, and then you'd also have to explain why Jesus was carrying his cross when we know that the petibulum is carried by the criminals, which is the crossbeam. Jesus is carrying a cross, but you cannot show any evidence that criminals carried the single beam. You would have to then now explain that, because that would then certainly go against your position.
Okay, but I just check Acts 5:30 again. Whom you killed, having hanged him on the xylon. So he carried that where he was hanged.
Yeah.
So
as I say,
he carried the xylon then in that case.
Yeah, and that's what you need to show through historical evidence that criminals carried that portion of their stake, of their torture, their it's getting late, I'm getting tired. The execution object. We know that we have historical evidence to say that they carried the petibulum, the crossbeam. We know that for a fact.
But right? Is Peter evidence for you when he says he was hanged on a xylon?
Well, it's evidence that exulon is utilized. Yeah. But that's not evidence that that's what he carried. You okay. Have to show historical evidence that this is what the Romans were making people do.
Okay.
Because otherwise that would be speculation. You'd just be speculating that he carried the stake, but you'd have no evidence in order to support that the Romans did that, because we know we know that the Romans were executing on all different shapes, all different, and possibly very much that they were crucifying on stakes on one piece of wood. But we don't have any evidence to show, or, well, I'm not saying that we don't have any evidence. I don't know of any evidence that would say that the Romans were making the criminals carry that stake. They only made them carry, as far as I know, the crossbeam. And the crossbeam goes on a two-piece stake. So if Jesus is carrying that, you now need to show that Jesus would have carried his own one-piece stake.
Okay, I will have a look into it.
And if you can find that, then that would be good, certainly good support as an argument. And if you can't find it, you'd have to ask why you can't find it. Because maybe they didn't carry the one stake. And that's why you can't find it.
Okay.
Which would then support the fact that Jesus was carrying the petibulum, which is the crossbeam. Which would then support a cross.
It would still not be enough evidence for me, but I would accept your. I still already accept your view on that, but you already said that we will disagree on that.
Oh, I knew that we were going to disagree on this one. That's fine. It's fine. It's not a problem. But anyway,
okay.
I'm gonna finish here. It's like 3 hours 40. I am getting tired and I've got to get up for work in the morning, so I'm gonna go to sleep.
Me too.
Yeah, but thank you very much for coming on. I do appreciate you coming on and putting forth your position. Like I said, I think you just need to, if you can find that piece of information, then that would certainly help support your position. I think if you can find that information, but have a look, see if you can find something that supports. Maybe the governing body has written something on that particular subject. So
I'm not so practiced in searching these things, so I'm not sure if I'll find something.
Okay, if you do, so to be honest, if you find something and you're not practiced, it means that it's probably quite readily available. So it shouldn't be difficult to find, and would actually again support your position. Because if you've got to go searching for something, it could mean that it's not there. If it's something that you find quite easily, and you're not, so I would suggest that would be something that supports your position. So anyway, thank you very much for coming on. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Okay, well, thank you very much for Dennis for coming on and putting in his arguments. As I said, we were always going to disagree on whether Jesus was crucified upon a stake or on a cross. My position hasn't changed. Obviously, it's still a cross, and I might actually do a study properly into the cross of Tammuz as well, just for that, because actually it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses that utilize the cross of Tammuz. I probably go in and do a bit more of a study on that. So Sunday, I should be doing a video on Sunday where it'd be just open discussion. So I'm going to try and do every Sunday just open discussion. People can just ask questions. And then next week, I've got a busy week next week. I'm working away most of next week. So I might do a video next week, but we'll see. Hopefully, I will do one next week. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to do the law or Hebrew, some more Hebrew Israelite arguments. Probably I might do might do the law, actually. Depends. If you've got a preference, let me know. Send me an email, put a comment into the comments if there's something you specifically would like a study on. I'm willing to take requests on that as well. So I obviously have a lot of writings that I've done, a lot of studies that I've done, so I'm just going through them, different studies. But if there's something that you would like to see, feel free to let me know, and I'll probably do one. Apart from that, I'm quite tired now. It's 12:15, but it's quite early for me. But I've been up really late recently, so I am actually quite tired. My eyes are starting to get a bit tired, so I might try and have a bit of a sleep, which probably means I get up early in the morning, which is okay because I've got to go to work, so that's fine. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope that the evidence and the study that I've done either will solidify your position, if you have one. Obviously, I haven't been able to convince Dennis of against his, so I've probably solidified his position on where he's coming from. If you're cross, if you believe in the cross, hopefully the evidence I presented here, the study that we've done, helps you to see that Jesus was crucified upon a cross. And maybe I've changed your mind. Maybe I've even changed your mind. Maybe you believed in a cross and think, wow, your evidence is rubbish. I now believe in a stake. Or maybe you believed in a stake and now you believe in a cross. Probably not. Probably not many people are going to change their position. I'll be very surprised. I have convinced people in the past. I'm quite pleased of that. I was quite honored, actually, when the guy, he doesn't speak to me anymore, but I was quite honored when he changed his position and updated his Bible translation to include cross instead of stake, and put my details and everything in the translation, and wrote why he changed it, and it was on my study. But yeah, so it can happen. People can change their minds, obviously. Like I say, I was quite honored by that fact. But yeah, maybe you haven't changed your mind. Maybe you think I'm talking absolute rubbish. Lots of people do, and that's fine. I am going to finish there. I will try and do a video on Sunday. So if you are watching, if you'd like to join in and you've got some questions, feel free to ask. On Sunday, it will be just open discussion. I'll probably have some topics if nobody else is, we don't get any questions. So I'll go through some topics and some different things. And maybe even I might even try and find some more evidence against maybe the Tammuz one. I need to do the Tammuz. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. But let me know in the comments if whether you are whether you've remained, you've changed, you've found the information helpful, pointless, just whatever. Let me know, because I'm interested in people's opinions of my studies and my work. Appreciate all kind of feedback, whether you agree or disagree. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you hopefully on Sunday. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't as well, because obviously that helps with the YouTube algorithms. Hate saying that word. Okay, thank you.